talk now about something that's kind of boring, but you have to talk about it when you talk about Maryland. And that's the convention government. Basically, beginning in 1774, a parallel government arose in Maryland, which was based on the lower house of the General Assembly, those who for now many, many decades had been in opposition to the proprietary authority, which was centered in the upper house and in the governorship, and had increasingly become the defenders of what increasingly was called the Patriot movement in Maryland, which was paralleled by a Patriot movement in the other colonies as well, opposing the actions of the Crown and Parliament. So this convention government begins to emerge in the middle of 1774. The first convention was held on June 22nd, 1774. It was in response to the call from Boston to, when Parliament closed their harbor, Boston being a town that depended upon its harbor facilities, they sent out the first of these circular letters to all of the colonies asking them for help and support. And so Maryland decided that they should get together with representatives from all the counties, decide what they could do about the crisis in Boston, up in New England. So, it just kind of had an organic beginning. People talking about we should do this. Of course, it could not be done within the legal confines of the proprietary government. The governor, Robert Eden, had dissolved the General Assembly, so it wasn't even sitting. And so they decided to call their own kind of impromptu meeting of the lower house of the General Assembly. And so they sent out calls to all the counties, and the response was tremendous. 92 delegates representing every single county in Maryland, plus Baltimore and Annapolis, both of which had separate representation. They gathered together in Annapolis in late June of 1774. They condemned the Boston Port Act, closing the port of Boston, voted to send aid to Boston to help its citizens. They were very, very careful to call what they did resolves, not laws. They didn't want to get into a legal dispute with the proprietary government over them, trying to usurp the authority of the legally constituted lower house of the General Assembly. The important point to note is that this was really early on. The first Continental Congress didn't happen until September. So here, 3 months earlier, and here in Maryland, we were coming up with one of these extra legal governments, much like the Continental Congress became later that year. The first extra legal convention was so successful that the members called another one, and then another one, and then another one. Finally, the fifth one was held in July of 1775, so just a little over a year after the first convention was held. And by that point, July of 1755, this extra legal convention government had become the government of Maryland. It had become the functioning government of Maryland. You still had the proprietary governor, but he exercised no authority. You still had, in theory, a General Assembly, but the governor never called it into session. So in fact, the entire government of Maryland, by the summer of 1775, was this extra legal convention government or patriot government. It had a council of safety, a 5-member council of safety, an executive, plural executive, exercised all the functions that the governor normally would have. It had committees of correspondence and safety to be sure that the resolves of this convention were communicated to all of the counties, and the committees of safety were to ensure that they were in fact carried out. That fifth convention in the summer of 1775 created what they called an association of freemen. It's a euphemism. It was a loyalty oath. All of the committees of safeties were to take this around to all adult males in their communities and have them read this loyalty oath where they pledged loyalty to the extra legal government. And if they didn't sign it, their names were entered on a list of what were called non-jurors and sent to the extra legal government in Annapolis. Basically, that was a hit list of people that they couldn't count on to be loyal to this new extra legal government.
Okay. Coming.
coming. There it is.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So that convention government, is
Yeah.
that the one we had briefly talked about that Charles Carroll would have been a part of and been
Yeah.
able to participate in?
Yeah, Charles Carroll participated in this. Of course, he could not participate in the legally constituted government of Maryland. He never could have been elected to the lower house of the General Assembly, the House of Delegates, or to the Senate because he was a Roman Catholic. This extra legal government promptly put him in as a member because he had distinguished himself in that Avalon First Citizen debate and had become basically a patriot hero. So he participated in that extra legal government right up through the end of the colonial period.
Greg?
Yes.
The previous slide had an intriguing picture that I don't think you addressed.
That's just filler.
Not for the poor guy down on the bottom.
That's tarring and feathering someone who doesn't agree with you. The Patriots took these kinds of extreme actions against those who refused to support these extra legal governments that eventually came about in all the different colonies. This, I think, is in Massachusetts. Tarring and feathering was, in fact, a very, very, very life-threatening thing because tar has to be hot for it to be liquid enough to pour on you, and that can cause these tremendous burns. So a lot of people died from tarring and feathering. Yeah.
Where were these convention meetings?
They met at the State House. Well, no, they did not meet at the State House. Where would they have met? They were probably meeting at the theater here on West Street then. I really don't know.
The Mann Hotel?
Because they torn down the State House.
Man's Tavern, maybe?
No,
No.
I don't even think Mann's was built by that point. They came a couple of years later. I don't know where they met. Really don't. So the results of this convention government is that it greatly reduced political tensions in Maryland. The Popular Party, or Patriot Party, was now firmly in control of the colony of Maryland. And the most important thing here, from our perspective, again, Crown and Parliament had not been our continuing problem since the very beginning of the colonization of Maryland. It had been the proprietor. Well, now the proprietor is effectively removed from control in the colony, even though the governor still remains here. So most Maryland political leaders believed that they had won their battle for power, and they now could govern the colony as they saw fit in the best interest of the citizens of Maryland. And the important point is that they could see no point whatsoever, nothing to be gained by going the next step that all the other colonies were moving towards, of declaring independence from Britain. So Marylanders became the most reluctant rebels of all of the colonists in any of the states. And it was a source of great frustration to many people. Listen to this. As late as May 21st, 1776, May 21st, 1776, 6 weeks before the Declaration of Independence is going to be approved in Congress, Maryland's convention, this extra-legal government that now controlled Maryland, unanimously prohibited our delegates in the Continental Congress from even discussing independence. 6 weeks and unanimous vote in the convention. No, we're not going to even consider independence. And of course, Virginia is now, and Massachusetts romping quickly towards that. It resulted in this reaction by John Adams. Those of you who heard this before, I love this quote, so I always read it. John Adams' reaction when he heard how reluctant Maryland was to the notion of making that next step to declaring independence. He wrote, "Maryland is so eccentric a colony, sometimes so hot, sometimes so cold, now so high, then so low, that I know not what to say about it or to expect from it. When they get it going, I expect some wild, extravagant flight or other from it. To be sure, they must go beyond anybody else when they begin to go." So in other words, in his opinion, Maryland had further to go than any other colony to support independence. And that was a real problem because geographically we're right in the middle of the colonies, and it was a great concern to people like John Adams who were racing towards independence. Realistically, Maryland was hoping against hope for something that on the ground didn't look or looked increasingly impossible. Lexington and Concord had happened in April of 1775, first bloodshed of the War for Independence. June 17th, Battle of Breeds Hill or Bunkers Hill in Boston. Congress had appointed George Bush the head of an American Army, Commander-in-Chief, in June of 1775. January 1st, the British had bombed and literally destroyed Norfolk at the head of Chesapeake Bay. 2 weeks later, British warships had actually entered Chesapeake Bay and up into Maryland waters, much to the terror and horror of people along the bay. And then, even though they had just unanimously prohibited our delegates from even discussing independence, Maryland could really see the handwriting on the wall, and in June of 1776, authorized the famous 2,000-man flying camp. Flying camp means simply units that were very mobile. They would be able to move around quickly. They didn't literally fly. The 2,000-mile flying camp regiment to join Washington's Continental Army at this point up in New York. So here we have Governor Eden. In May, the convention voted to request, not order, not demand, but to politely request that he leave the colony. He agreed. Both sides realized that the things were just marching along so rapidly towards independence that it did no good for him to stay here, where he really hadn't been in effective control since the summer of 1775 anyway. So he leaves, but under the best possible terms. He's the only one of the colonial governors whose citizens led them down to the boat and waved a cheerful goodbye and blew kisses and that sort of thing. Well, that's what we did with Robert Eden. A British frigate, the Folly, arrived off Annapolis Harbor on June 23rd, and the Council of Safety, that plural executive of this extra-legal government, escorted him down to a barge to take him out to the Folly with every mark of respect. And the council wrote, "The governor will leave this province with the most friendly regard for its inhabitants and will do everything in his power that may contribute towards promoting a reconciliation between the mother country and her colonies." So here we are, June 23rd. The Council of Maryland is still expressing this belief that we can resolve this issue between the colonies and the mother country. Very strange. None of the other colonies were thinking that at all in late June. This is cheeky. When Robert Eden gets back to England, King George III makes him the first Baron of Maryland. Isn't that outrageous? I mean, really, Baron of Maryland. And that title continues down through the family. The existing title holder is the 9th Baron of West Auckland and the 7th Baron of Maryland. Just outrageous. Anyway, Eden's descendant, Anthony Eden, was Foreign Secretary under Winston Churchill during World War II, and then Prime Minister of Great Britain, 55 to 57, had to resign over the Suez Canal crisis. And here his nephew, who is the title holder in the family. As I mentioned, John is the 9th Baron of West Auckland and the 7th Baron of Maryland. And here's a picture of Anthony Eden. Crank it up. I have a great Anthony Eden story. I don't have time to tell it in this.
Go ahead.
But it's really a great story with a wonderful. It hinges on the fact that Anthony Eden was made Lord Avon when he resigned, and so he was Lord Avon until his death. And we have an Avon lady in here, so I'm so excited. I told her we may have if we have time at the end, I'll tell my Lord Avon story, but if we don't, I'll tell her privately. She'd share it with you. Maryland independence. The Continental Congress was meeting in Philadelphia all during this time that we were saying goodbye to our governor and so forth. And on the 7th of June, even before Governor Eden left, the Virginians, led by Richard Henry Lee, introduced the Virginia Resolution that begins, "These united colonies are and ought to be free and independent states." And that's what Maryland didn't want to see entered into Congress. They did not want Congress to address this issue of independence. So Maryland asked for a delay to bring our delegates in Congress back, consult on this issue. Congress resolutely refused to delay at all. And so instead, 2 of the Maryland delegates in Congress Samuel Chase and Charles Carroll of Carrollton, came back home to Maryland and worked all of their political connections here in Maryland to change minds. Remember, May 21st, the convention government had unanimously prohibited our delegates from even discussing independence. Now Carroll and Chase come back to Maryland to try to reverse that, so Maryland will not be the odd colony out when in fact the vote for independence happens, and it's going to happen because the Virginia Resolution for Independence is on the table. The 28th of June, 1776, at the last possible minute, the Maryland Convention, in fact, reversed itself, freeing our delegates in Congress to vote their conscience on the issue of independence. Word was dispatched to Philadelphia, didn't arrive there until July 1st. That's the day that Congress began discussing the Virginia Resolution for Independence. So we just, in the very last possible minute, allowed our delegation in Congress to vote on independence, or to consider it. In fact, that vote on independence occurred the next day, July 2nd, not July 4th. We celebrate the long run day as Independence Day. There's this show on television called, it's Fact or Fiction, or what's it called?
Fact or Fiction.
Is it Fact or Fiction?
Yeah.
And I heard a promo for it the other day about something about we celebrate the wrong day for Independence Day. I don't know the show's. This is what he's talking about. John Adams went home and wrote to Abigail on the night of July 2nd and said, "This day will go down in history with parades and orations and fireworks and wonderful celebration because we've declared our independence." Yeah, we did, but we celebrated on the 4th, which is one of those strange little quirks in American history. The 4th of July is the day Congress adopted the propaganda document for European courts, the Declaration of Independence, penned by Jefferson primarily. And since that had a date on it, that's the date that stuck, July 4th, not the date when we really declared independence, which is July 2nd. And Maryland concurred. So at that time in Congress, each state had one, or each colony, now state, had one vote. You had to have at least 3 delegates present to be able to cast that state's vote. So Maryland did, in fact, vote. We know that. We don't know who did because you had to have, each vote just cast, state cast one vote. There we go. So the question is, who, in fact, of the Marylanders in Congress voted for independence? These are the 4 we remember today in the history books, whose portraits line the chamber and the State House of Maryland signers: William Peka, Samuel Chase, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, and Thomas Stone. And we all remember them by that little ditty. Crank the screen up so I'll remember the ditty. Oh, I don't have the ditty there. Why did Peka chase Carroll with the stone? Why did Peka chase Carroll with the stone? That's how I remember Maryland's 4 signers. The question, though, is who actually voted for independence on July 2nd? Because Samuel Chase wasn't there. He was back home in Maryland, having convinced people to change their minds on independence. Charles Carroll of Carrollton wasn't there. He was back home as well. Now, that left Peka and Stone to vote for independence, but they couldn't cast Maryland's vote unless there was a 3rd Marylander in the delegation. You had to have 3. So, who was the 3rd Marylander to support independence on July 2nd? Well, it was a man named John Rogers, someone that no one remembers. He was an attorney from Prince George's County, a large landowner. He'd served in those extra-legal Maryland conventions. He was elected to the Continental Congress in 1775. But Maryland held new elections on the 8th of July to select a new delegation to represent us in Congress. And John Rogers was not returned. So he was not there on August 2nd when the engrossed copy of the Declaration was ready for everyone in Congress to sign their names on. And so he wasn't there to sign. He wasn't a member of Congress at that point. And so despite the fact that he voted for independence on July 2nd, he didn't have the opportunity to sign it, so it's completely forgotten by the history books. And he's the only person known to have voted for independence who did not later sign the document itself or have the opportunity to sign. So I think that's kind of sad. I think we need to erect a large statue in Prince George's County to remember this man who, as much as anyone else, took a stand for independence, representing the state of Maryland. Maryland had its own Declaration of Independence.